Last topic for today, because I'm getting, and a few things I was wound up about that one. Last topic for today, I want to talk about Islamization and Islamophobia. We've talked about Islamization before, and this is a basic idea that Islam, the religion Islam, I am not talking about every single Muslim. The religion Islam, in the core of its teachings from the time of its founding, is a conquest ideology. Islam teaches in the Quran, in the example of Muhammad's life, in the writings of the Hadith, Islam is filled with the idea that the very purpose of the religion is to force the world into submission to it. The duty of a devout Muslim is to spread Islam by jihad, whether it is violent jihad or cultural jihad or civilizational jihad, which are kind of the same thing. But the idea, the focus, the meaning of life in Islam is for the devout Muslims in this world to push Islam so that the entire world is brought into submission to Islam under its law, Sharia, enforced by the one world government, the Caliphate. This is the purpose of Islam. It has always been. Since the founding, it is what Muhammad said it was. It's what all the documents and all the authorities you ever can go to say it is. It is about forcing Islam to be the one religion of the world. And Islam encourages people, its followers, to engage in the forced conversion of every other person into submission to Islam. So, Islamization happening in America. I want to mention 3 quick stories and urge you to think about how different America would be. We're talking about in the last segment how different America would be if socialism became the law, the New Green Deal became the law. Now we'll talk about what happened if Islamization succeeded. Let me start with, there was a case that made its way all the way almost to the Supreme Court. It was brought up, raised at the Supreme Court. Writ of certiorari was denied. But I want to tell you about this case. There's a girl in Charles County, Maryland, a girl named Kalia Wood. She's in public school, and in her public school class, they were doing a segment on the Muslim world. In this segment, the school gave her an assignment to write out the Shahada. The Shahada is the statement of conversion to Islam. It is what, when Muhammad went murderously around that part of the world and forced Jews and all sorts of other communities into submission to Islam, the way to escape being killed by Muhammad or his various followers of the centuries was to recite the Shahada, to say that Islam is the only true faith, Allah is the only true God, and Muhammad is one true messenger, or words to that effect. I didn't want to say it, but that's what the idea of it was. The Shahada is a very specific prayer in Islam, a conversion statement. It's what still today people recite when they are converting to Islam. So this girl, this American girl who's Christian, is asked to write out in her public school as her assignment to write out the Shahada. She's saying, I don't want to. Her parents saying, we don't want her to do this. This is not right. You don't ask any other students to write, or you don't ask students to write out the conversion, the prayer of commitment or the statement of adopting the Christian faith. But this was the assignment, to write the Shahada. She, Kalia Wood, her family sues. They ended up in the 4th Circuit, the Federal 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, Wood versus Arnold, and the court just said, well, golly gee willikers, we can't talk about what schools can do. In fact, the court said, the 4th Circuit said, school authorities, not the courts, are charged with the responsibility of deciding what speech is appropriate in the classroom. This is a 3-judge panel in February of this year, the 4th Circuit. So the family took it to the Supreme Court to say, can you please agree, Supreme Court, that their daughter does not have to be indoctrinated into Islam as a condition of attending public school. On October 15th this year, the Supreme Court declined to take the case. When they do that, it leaves the Fourth Circuit, the lower court's ruling in place. So the Fourth Circuit found for the school, said the girl can't be complaining about having to write out the Shahada. Contrast that, by the way, with the many cases in which the courts are perfectly comfortable telling, for example, the high school coach in California, you can't kneel after the game is over and say a quiet private prayer. That violates the Establishment of Religion clause. That violates the First Amendment. The various cases courts have taken, they say you can't have a prayer before a city council meeting. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of cases in which courts in this country have cracked down on Christianity and tried to say there's just an absolute wall of separation, no expression of faith, no prayer in public school, no prayer at graduation, no prayer at football games. I mean, the courts have been perfectly comfortable shutting down any expression of Christian faith. But a girl challenging, I don't want to write the Shahada, I don't want to be indoctrinated into Islam in public school. Fourth Circuit says too bad. Supreme Court can't be bothered. Not a good an example. This is an example of Islamization, a really bad example for America. Second example I want to talk about of Islamization of America. You know, we recently had the big discussion about whether or not America should have stayed in northern Syria when we had the Turks were going to be invading down in northern Syria to fight the Kurds. And the Kurds have been our allies in our battles against ISIS. So many Americans were upset that there was an unwillingness, it seemed at the time, an unwillingness of President Trump to keep the American forces in place to help the Kurds fight against the Turks. So everyone recognizes in this example that I'm telling you that Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, Erdogan is a jihadist. He's not just a president of a country who happens to be Muslim. He has made many statements. He is a jihadist. He agrees with the idea of Islam, that Islam is, the purpose of Islam's existence is to force the world, everyone, into submission to Islam. Erdogan has talked about it. Erdogan has identified groups he can't wait to suppress. He can't wait to force into Islam. So Erdogan, we see this danger. We saw it in northern Syria with Erdogan showing up to fight and to get after the Kurds. However, why isn't there the protest? You heard many leftists in this country, many in Washington saying, this is terrible. We didn't stand with the Kurds. Look how rotten Erdogan is. He's going to kill them. He's a terrible guy. Erdogan is a terrible guy. Erdogan is funding mosques, Muslim Brotherhood mosques in America. Let that sink in. The ideology of Islam, we just talked about, the conquest ideology of Islam, supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, which itself, that organization agrees its purpose is to support jihad for the purpose of spreading Islam through enforcing submission to Islam. That's the purpose of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is now the de facto head of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is a jihadist. Erdogan is funding mosques in America. All these people so concerned about pulling U.S. troops back in northern Syria ought to be talking about why in the world is Erdogan even allowed to fund any mosques of any kind in America? Why is he even allowed to do that? There were speeches. Erdogan came and gave a huge speech at the opening of this Diyanet Center of America, DCA, largest mosque in northern America, funded by Erdogan to the tune of $100 million. And this is not the only one. The point is, Erdogan uses their money, his country's money, Turkey's money, to fund Muslim Brotherhood-friendly mosques in America, which are in turn teaching all the Muslims who attend that mosque, attend those Islamic centers, attend the schools, Islamic schools they no doubt fund. All those people are getting the message that Erdogan wants them to get, that the duty of a devout Muslim is to engage in jihad for the purpose of forcing the world into submission to Islam under Sharia. He's funding those centers here, and we're sitting on our hands thinking, well, what can we do about that? How about a law that says no foreign money into any American religious institution? Okay, don't even pick just on the Muslims. any institution. The idea that we're just sitting on our hands watching this Islamization of America, watching this funding of Muslim Brotherhood mosques, and we can't think of anything we can do about it. This is Islamization of America. One other quick story happening in Minnesota. And, I always tell you people, my friends, I love Minnesota. I've been there dozens of times. My dad grew up there. My mom lived there. I've been there many, many times. It is actually a lovely, beautiful state. It is, however, at this point, has a massive population of Somalian Muslims who came to America in our ridiculous refugee policies we simply refuse to fix, or we haven't fixed yet. So in Minneapolis, there is a neighborhood that is low-income housing, government-provided housing called Cedar Riverside. It's overwhelmingly filled with Muslim Americans from Somalia. So you have the Cedar Riverside area in Minneapolis that is filled with Somali Muslims. Three things have happened. Number one, on the city council now, there's a guy named Abdi Warsame. He's on the city council of Minneapolis. He is a Somali Muslim. And let me tell you, three things happening there. I mean, many things are happening in Minnesota. Here are three of them. One, this Cedar Riverside area is, as I say, all low-income housing. It's not just like one apartment building. It's many, many buildings, massive big area. I meant to look up. It's like, I don't know, it's like 40 acres, whatever. It's huge. So the city is paying to build a wall around the Cedar Riverside public housing. The city is paying for a wall because the people complain that they have some crime there. Okay, I'm sorry about crime. I don't want crime to happen. But the city is moving to protect this community by building a wall, security gates, so that these people living in our taxpayer-funded public housing are going to have a wall and security gates. And one of the complaints of the people who wanted the wall was that there's some subway stop on one side near this community, and some people have the audacity to walk through the Cedar Riverside area over to wherever they're trying to go to some business. They're complaining that non-Somali Muslims walk through this publicly funded Cedar Riverside public housing project. The wall is one. Number two, to live in this complex is $500 a month. That's what the rent they pay, $500 a month to have an apartment in a protected by the city Cedar Riverside area. There are people on waiting lists who want to get into these who are, Native American. There are significant Native American populations in Minneapolis. There are also lower income families of all racial backgrounds waiting to get into this housing. So people in the housing pay $500 a month. If they want to leave, the Minneapolis City Council set this up for them. If they want to leave to go back to visit their homeland, go back to Somalia, or go over to Mecca to do their Hajj, what they have to do, a devout Muslim has to at least once in their life if they can, the city, instead of saying, well, you're abandoning your apartment, you can't, because the people are saying they can't afford to pay rent. They can't pay the $500 a month if they want to spend money going back to Somalia to visit or to go to the Hajj. And they don't want to lose their apartments, but they can't afford to pay while they're gone. The city said, okay, for the time you're gone, it's only $75 a month. So families sit in waiting lists who would like to get in, and they can't get in because the city of Minneapolis is essentially subsidizing the Somalians living in that neighborhood, who, by the way, I'd like to point out, these are refugees. And refugee standard is supposed to be that's too dangerous where you live. You can't go back to where you live. Obviously, they're not feeling it's that dangerous. They're going back to Somalia, where they said they had to leave, had to come to America. But they're going back there, and the city of Minneapolis is subsidizing their absence, not collecting the money they should be collecting for those apartments, leaving people on waiting lists. Last point, they are going to use city funding to build in some big parking lot nearby an African village to help them feel at home, help them feel with African stores, restaurants, housing, all sorts of, it's again a project to make sure they feel at home in Minneapolis. There's much more to this story at Minneapolis, but I got to close out by saying that I got to get to my why this matters to you, but this is Islamization. This is a surrender of our standards, our laws, in order to make the Islamic community in Minneapolis feel comfortable, to protect them in ways we don't protect other people. We don't protect other people in that housing, but we do protect them. We build a wall to make sure they're safe and do not possibly have. And you talk about creating a no-go zone. This is the city enabling a no-go zone.